p.m. Joint hearing between the Committee on Technology and the Committee on Energy, Economic Development, and Tourism. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to remind the audience that the Technology Committee live streams our proceedings, and actually in collaboration with the Senate Clerk's Office, we are piloting live stream technology through the camera. It's high def, so if you don't want to live on the internet forever, I'd suggest you stand on your testimony. We have it in the record for the members to review anyway. So why don't we start with our one measure, SB 2527, relating to broadband service infrastructure. This establishes the Broadband Service Infrastructure Grant Program to award grants to applicants to extend deployment of facilities used to provide broadband service to unserved and underserved areas of the state. First up, DBED.
Chairs Keohokalole and Chair Wakai, members of the committee. I'm Bert Long. I'm here to represent Mike McCarthy, Director of DBED. We stand our testimony and provide comments. If you have any questions, I'm here for any of those questions.
Okay, thank you. DCCA.
DCCA stands on its written testimony to provide comments.
Thank you. And Charter Communications.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Young.
Chair Keohokalole, Chair Senator Moriwaki. I'm just going to make this very brief. You have our written testimony submitted. It's a very much similar bill as last year to broaden the scope of broadband infrastructure using a partnership between state and private funds. I think there are some needs across the state, especially in the neighboring islands. This bill, unlike previous year, last year, is that there is no appropriation in this measure. It's simply creating a framework. I think we can discuss further along the line about an appropriation or about the funding mechanism. But at this time, I think it's important that based on some of the best practices in other states, that we could establish a framework hopefully this year. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
So, yeah, just to clarify, we scheduled the vehicle with the appropriation. I'm inclined to blank out the appropriation and leave that to Ways and Means anyway. Okay, thank you.
My apologies.
That's good, yeah. Thank you. Okay, that's all the testimony we've received on this. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Okay.
I have a question.
Question, Senator Moriwaki.
Yeah, for who is this? DCCA? DCCA. Yeah, in your testimony, you said that the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund has $20 billion, and that if we're not careful, we may not have the appropriation for doing some work that the feds could pay for.
Right.
Can you clarify that and how we might frame this so that
Sure.
we don't lose, money?
That's a little problematic right now because the change occurred last week. The vote occurred last week. We haven't seen the ruling. I've heard that other states like New York and someone mentioned Alaska that have programs were excluded from accessing the $20.4 billion. So we just brought it to your attention because that it could be problematic. We'll know more as the rule comes out. But there is an FCC news about it. So it provides information. I'll give it to the clerks about the 40.
But there was no recorded justification or connection between the lack of award for those states and their monies, was there?
I think the ideology was that these states already have broadband expansion programs, and according to, I think, my recollection, I'm sorry, Chair Pai, the head of the FCC, he wanted to use the money sparingly so that he didn't want to provide funding for places that already have funding. And this program is part of was considered the CAF program, which was considered the USF program, and we all contribute to this amount in our bills. So we already pay into this bill. There's a provider that very much accesses these funds. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to jeopardize us bringing down these funds when we already contribute to it.
So is it that any state that puts in some money then gets ousted from this
I'm
pool of getting money from the
The rule,
feds?
I mean, they voted, I didn't see the wording itself, so it might have a limited impact, but I was told that New York sued the FCC based on this, because New York was explicitly excluded from having access to this fund because they have a program. But I'm not sure if it's just having a program or having small locations. We don't know what the actual wording is.
Maybe in a committee report or something, you can say to follow them and then maybe adjust.
It's still new. Sorry.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, any other questions? Senator Wakai?
Bert? Yes, Senator. Two big infrastructure asks. You have this, which will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 million. You have another capital improvement ask for a cable landing site in the neighborhood of $10 million. Which one do you prefer?
You know, we did not put this bill in front of the legislature, and our only priority, and I've talked about this probably for the last 3 years, 2018, 2019, and 2020, our top priority is the $10 million CIP request.
So would it be prudent that we really push your neutral cable landing site? Because in the best case scenario for you, if you were to get that $10 million and this $5 million, could you do both simultaneously, or would one have to come after the other?
Ideally, you know, we would like to establish a broadband presence in the state of Hawaii, and I think the appropriation for the cable landing would be an appropriate way to kick that off. As we start to develop the organization, the resources, and how we would manage broadband going forward, then we could definitely look at a grant program. But you know, as DCCA said, it might be a good idea to wait and see what the feds come out with in terms of how they want to release the $20.4 billion to the states.
So I'm just trying to reconcile all this in my head. So pending the federal decisions, would it be prudent for us to just set up the mechanism here without any kind of funding, just in case we get some federal monies some scraps that they're going to throw our way, and have something set up to be able to capture some of those money for the day when you're ready to deploy broadband to rural
Well,
areas?
that's a good idea. I think the thing that really needs to be considered is whether we actually have the resources to put the grant program together. So there's a lot of rulemaking and a time period of 180 days that actually comes into play if this bill were to pass. So we would have to meet that time frame, and it would require probably additional resources in order to achieve that.
Thank you, Bert.
I'll just adding on to what Senator Wakai is saying. So if you were to say, what do you need most to set up the broadband capability and the system with this cable landing, what do you need today to do something so that you can set up the framework to whatever funds come in, or if we have to appropriate funds, what is that foundational piece that you need?
Well, you know,
And how much would it cost?
so if I were to, again, refer back to some of the studies that were done via the Broadband Task Force and the strategic plan, they had always recognized some of the key critical infrastructure that's required for broadband is, and what the state could participate in, is the carrier-neutral cable landing infrastructure, which attracts submarine fiber cables to land here. So we've spent, you know, the better part of the last 3 sessions trying to convince legislators that that is, in fact, the way to get started to really have the state be an active participant in our broadband future, right? So that's the way to get started. And this is something that's been talked about for probably the last dozen years. So I continue to stay firm to that priority. And other projects or initiatives that come along with broadband, be it, anything down the line from that key sort of submarine fiber cable position is you have issues with inter-island fiber, backhaul, a terrestrial backhaul, you have small cell, and you have community and rural broadband. All of those are very important. But in order for us to really get a foothold in being an active participant in Hawaii's broadband future and being a part of, architecting that, I think it starts with the carrier-neutral cable landing.
And how much is that? Is that the 10 million?
That's the $10 million that's been asked.
And that would not go counter to what the so many billion of the FCC Connect America program, or what is it called?
No,
Digital
that wouldn't, because
opportunity. If we put in the 10 million, that's not going to go counter or let us lose funds that we could get from the DOF.
No, because we would be actually, the way we have architected or, the design of the infrastructure, we are proposing to actually provide infrastructure that connects 4 of the major islands. The $10 million would cover Oahu and the Big Island, and additional funds would be required for Maui and Kauai, and we're looking for, additional funds to accommodate that. But that would be things like horizontal bores, conduit, the permitting, the surveys, and that would be basically building like a digital freeway into Hawaii that the broadband providers, whether they be submarine fiber cables or inter-island fiber, could now easily access. And what this does is it closes the window for all the permitting period. So you're taking 2 years, which from a timing standpoint, 2020 is the year to do it. You can take 2 years now, and all the submarine fiber cables that are currently bypassing us, we have a chance to convince them to consider landing in Hawaii, because now they don't have to, worry about that 2-year window. We're going to be starting to close that window.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
I have a question for Myung, for Charter.
It's in the budget. It's in the budget.
Yes, Chair.
Since you appear to be the only broadband provider who testified in this,
Of course,
on
Chair.
this measure, I specifically chose this vehicle because there was an appropriation section. Given the context of the discussion and the testimony that was submitted, would you be opposed to having us remove the appropriation language in the vehicle to keep it moving?
No, not at all. I think that was the whole intent. I think we did have a couple of measures, one in the House, one in the Senate. This measure, my recollection, my apologies, Senator Kahele introduced measure, and that's the version that you're hearing today. So our other measures do not have an appropriation. I did not get a chance to compare and contrast the exact verbiage, but in reviewing this measure currently as it stands, a lot of the mechanisms and principles that we support are in there. So we're okay. Yeah. To the
Thank
question.
you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, we'll recess for decision making. Having conferred with the EET committee, what I'm going to recommend we do is keep the appropriation language just in case, as the FCC ruling and the associated conversation bears out, there's still the opportunity to fund if it becomes clear that that's not something that might potentially undermine the efforts underway and the ability for broadband providers to seek federal money to extend out the network in the future. We are going to blank out the appropriation, and what I'd like to do is we're going to also add language in the committee report articulating these concerns. We have some tech amendments, but I'm also going to adopt the framework that we put in place in the Senate Draft 2 of SB 553 from the 2019 session, which essentially changes some of the broadband definitions so that they properly align with other sections of the code. Deletes language that would have prohibited applicants from using other funds in combination for these projects. We're gonna, the only differences are we're gonna keep the language that prohibits grant funding from being used to upgrade existing broadband infrastructure, because I'd prefer that this grant money be used for fiber to extend to areas where fiber does not currently exist. That's the whole point of the grant program. And deleting the length of time the applicant has been providing broadband service in the state from the scoring criteria. If you're good at putting fiber in the ground or in the air, then you should have a shot at sending it to areas where we don't have it. With them. And then we're also going to keep the minimum contribution at 20%, just for maximum flexibility, because these areas are the hardest areas to get connected. So if the legislature elects to provide money and determines that it's in the best interest of the state, then we want to do as much as we can to make sure that those areas get connected. Okay. Any questions?
So it's with SB 2527 with amendments. Chair Keohokalole, Senator English excused, myself, Senator Wakai,
Yes.
and Senator Favela excused. Your amendment, with amendments, it passes.
Thank you.
For the Committee on Energy, Economic Development, and Tourism, we will await quorum. Hopefully we'll get that on Friday, so we're going to defer decision-making to this Friday, February 5th at 250 here in this room, 414.
Thank you. We are adjourned. Okay, we're going to open up our 2:50 p.m. agenda. We will be hearing 3 pieces of legislation in the Technology Committee. The first is SB 2837, relating to the IT Steering Committee. This allows the IT Steering Committee to keep members who have been particularly helpful and useful on the board for continuity and capability purposes. So, first up, ETS, Doug.
Aloha, we stand under written testimony
In support, thank you. Department of Education. Thank you. Transform Hawaii Government.
Aloha, Chair.
Aloha.
Aloha, Chair Sakai and Senator Moriwaki. My name is Christine Sakuda, and I am the Executive Director of Transform Hawaii Government, and also have the privilege of serving on the IT Steering Committee. And we support this bill with some amendments. We think it's a great way for the public to participate in support of the State IT Strategic Plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's all the testimony we have. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to, questions, members? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to SB 2243. This requires the House and Senate to permit remote testimony via telephone at public hearings. Hawaii Civil Rights Commission. Okay, offering comments. Mayor's Office, County of Hawaii. Offering comments. HGEA. In support. Common Cause. In support. Young Progressives Demanding Action. In support. Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations. In support. Democratic Party of Hawaii.
Good afternoon. My name is Josh Frost. I'm the co-chair of the Democratic Party of Hawaii's Legislation Committee. We strongly support this bill and appreciate you guys hearing it. Remote testimony for the neighbor islands has been an issue of importance to the party for a long time. This is the first year it's been in our sort of top tier priorities because we felt it was time to take stronger action, given the fact that even though the bill's made it to conference a number of times in some form, it's never passed. There are a lot of people who, my co-chair lives on the Big Island and feels very strongly about this, but cannot testify today because she lives on the Big Island. So we think that the telephone version of remote testimony is a good step. You know, ultimately we'd like to see video remote testimony. There are people who can't afford to fly here at the drop of a hat. They have family, they have jobs. I also want to point out our testimony suggests that there are people with disabilities who can't fly over, right, because they're afraid to fly or they can't get on a boat. Or so we feel like this is not just an issue of access and democracy, but also one of disability rights. And so for all those reasons, we hope you'll pass the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Indivisible Hawaii. Thank you. We have two individuals, William Karen in support and Cynthia Reeves in support. That's all the testimony we've received. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Seeing none, members, questions? Okay, moving on to the last measure, SB 2432, relating to cable television. This amends the factors the DCCA must consider when determining whether cable service should be made available upon a new application of a cable franchise, and requires the director require cable operators to provide service to residences in their service area where there's a minimum density of at least 25 homes per linear mile, with certain exceptions. DCCA?
Please answer the testimony, providing comments and few suggestions.
Thank you. Charter?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thanks for hearing this measure. Charter Communications are in support of this measure. The measure makes amendments to the cable chapter. Right now, Charter Communications has the responsibility and the obligation to extend cable service wherever there's 25 homes per linear mile statewide. We are supportive of this measure to put that into statutes with the added exception that if there is another cable operator operating in a specific island, which is called service area, that this cable operator would not be obligated to extend 25 homes per mile based on their cost considerations. So right now, in current operation as it sits today, is that Oahu would be, I believe, the only service area that would be impacted by this legislation. We understand that the House currently heard the companion measure this morning, passed out with them several amendments, and we do ask for the committee's favorable passage of this measure as well. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all the submitted testimony we have on this measure. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Okay, seeing none. Questions? Okay, we will recess for decision making. Making on the 250 agenda. First up, SB 2837. Recommendation is to move out this measure unamended, but we will be making technical amendments for clarity and consistency. So this will be moving out as an SD1 with amendments.
Okay. Okay, so.
Yeah. Senator Moriwaki, can you please take the vote?
So to pass this measure out with amendments, Chair Keohokalole.
Aye.
Senator English, excuse. Myself, aye. Senator Wakai.
Yes.
And Senator Favela, excuse. This measure passes with amendments.
Thank you. On the next measure, relating to legislative testimony having reviewed the testimony and conferring with the committee, I'm going to defer this. We are currently live streaming right now and have been working since the advent of this committee to promote live stream capability, two-way capability at the legislature. So a bill requiring that the legislature permit remote testimony is redundant. We already have that capability by request, and it is utilized. It was utilized in the prior technology committee's jurisdiction for years, and no one ever took advantage of it because I don't know, for what, you don't schedule enough controversial bills
I think so. We need to
or
do
something.
much more controversial stuff.
So it's my intention to continue to work with the legislative staff to ensure that we're complying with ADA requirements in captioning while also providing better live stream access throughout the Capitol. So, so I'm going to defer this measure.
Can you say a couple of things?
Sure.
I think the day has long passed us where we should be live streaming, getting community input via broadband opportunities. The fact that the people of Hawaii still to this day do not want to engage the legislative process through some kind of technology means is astonishing to me. I mean, this idea of going on the telephone, I mean, you talk about old school, that is not progressive at all. I mean, we should follow the lead of the chair in providing it to the public, but what's more disheartening is the public doesn't even care anyway. You offer this opportunity for them, they don't get engaged in the policy discussions here. So this idea of build it and they will come, we've tried to build it, no one has come. So it's more of a statement about where are we as a community in terms of engaging the legislature. We provide as many opportunities and try to ease the burdens of on the public to come here and say their piece for or against legislation. But the fact that people don't take advantage is baffling to me. So Chair Keohokalole and I will continue to try to embrace technology and invite the community here, just hoping one day the community actually takes advantage of these opportunities that we're trying to lay in front of them.
And since that all just went on the internet, we've now dared them to rise up.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Any other comments?
Nope.
Okay. So we're gonna, thank you for that. We're gonna move on to the last piece of legislation, that's SB 2432. The recommendation is to move this measure out with amendments. We are going to accept the DCCA amendments and leave in the section on topography and geography, and otherwise move the bill out with technical amendments for clarity. Okay, any questions? Okay, seeing none, Senator Moriwaki.
Senate Bill 2432 with amendments, Chair.
Aye.
Senator English, excuse. Myself, aye. Senator Wakai.
Yes.
And Senator Pavela, excuse. This passes with amendments.
Thank you very much. We're adjourned. Okay, now we're gonna open the 2:55 p.m. decision-making. This is related to two pieces of legislation that were heard in committee last week, and we just need to vote them out. So the first is Senate Bill 2307. This requires that all state and state-funded facilities have internet, computer, and wireless access filters to block access to pornography sites. There were amendments made to this piece of legislation limiting the access filters to state offices so that we avoid state lands where there are residences or dorms and any sort of constitutional concerns we might have there. I believe we have the amendments. So, yes, Senator Moriwaki, SB 2307 with amendments.
With amendments, okay, Chair.
Aye.
Senator English, excuse. Myself, aye. Senator Wakai.
Yes.
And the measure passes with amendments.
Thank you. And the last measure, SB 2836, gives more flexibility to agencies for online options and enhance digital services. Recommendation is to move this unamended.
With technical amendments?
No, I think it was as is.
It's okay, as
Yeah.
is. To pass unamended, anyone voting with reservation, no? I'm not going to call your names.
Okay, it's too long.
Yeah. Okay. So it passes with, passes as is.
Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
That's it?